We depend on the bugs and bees to pollinate our plants. In fact, a full 70% of our flowers are insect pollinated. But it seems that some bee populations are at risk. We'll take a look at why and what we can do about it on this special one-hour edition of Great Gardening straight ahead.
We celebrate each year as we receive it.
For good nutrition, we need a balance of colors.
I like to can because I'm a gardener.
We brought home an orchard for our community.
This was just an overgrown area full of bramble.
Hello and welcome to Great Gardening. This week, what's the buzz? Well, it's all about bees and what they and other pollinators mean to our survival. Our perennial farm and garden experts are here to share their wisdom about that and much more. They are Tom Casper, president of the Duluth Garden Flower Society, and Bob Olin, St. Louis County educator and horticulturist. And thank you for being with us for a full hour during which we will offer our viewers and supporters a chance to get their own resources on bees and gardening in general, and to have their questions answered by you guys. But first, I want to ask you, how concerned are you each about the declines in the bee populations? I'll start with you, Bob.
Well, bees are absolutely essential, and essential for both honey production and a lot of the pollination that's going on. And it's a multifaceted issue and a problem, and I think that it's something we all need to be concerned about.
Yeah. And Tom, I know you've recently been doing some research about this.
Right, yeah, it seems to be a very big issue across our country and actually across the world. The issue continues to become greater and greater. But I want to go back for just a second. For the first time, this is our 12th season. For the first time, we were really recognized as farmers. And I like that.
Okay.
Because we are farmers.
All right, you are indeed. Well, we also want to introduce our generous phone volunteers who are taking time to answer your calls. They are the Carleton County Master Gardeners. So call them with your garden questions at 218-788-2844 or toll free 877-307-8762. You can also email your questions during this hour to askgardening@wdse.org. As mentioned, we're also offering some great resource books about bees and a DVD of some of our favorite garden tips from the show. My colleagues are standing by to tell you more about that coming up later. Well, bees are a huge factor in keeping us fed. The managed honeybee has been pollinating crops for thousands of years. And as you guys both know, there are a lot of other animal friends who do the same. So let's take a look at what some of those are.
Well, sure. There are many, many native insects that do the job, and we have over 350 actual native bees in addition to the honeybee, which is non-native, but nonetheless, the insects are important, and believe it or not, even these pesky mosquitoes can be pollinators.
No way.
I have to remind myself.
For something?
Yes. We have to remind ourselves they have their place as well. But surprisingly, even bats, hummingbirds can also be pollinators. And I mentioned the native bees. We have so many native species, over 350 in Minnesota alone, and actually they do a lot of the work as well. Honeybees, obviously, the additional benefit of honey production, but wasps, butterflies, moths, beetles. So really there's a great diversity of insects that are very, very active and involved in this pollination process.
And Bob, you happened to catch a shot of one on an apple blossom recently.
Yes, I did, and I admire photographers get great pictures. That took me a little while. They dart around left and right, and this is a native bee and doing some pollinating and carrying pollen. Of course, they're actually foraging. They're looking for food in the pollen as well as the nectar, and then they inadvertently, as they move from flower to flower, they're actually crossing the pollen to other flowers in the process. Hence, we get this natural hybridization that's actually occurring in nature. I wanted to point this out. This is the blueberry blossom, and these blooms are spectacular this year. We're going to have a great year setting up there. But you'll notice the bell-shaped flower on blueberries. Consequently, a lot of smaller insects really can't easily pollinate. You have to have a pretty long tongue or proboscis to get in there to actually access the nectar. And this is where bumblebees really are so very, very important. Again, we have many, many native bumblebee varieties as well.
All right. Well, though honeybees are not native to our region, beekeepers can be found here. And we visited one who came to Duluth to start a honey and bee products business with his son.
Back in 1976, I got my first hive down in the Twin Cities and started out not knowing a whole lot about anything, but I was inspired by some beekeepers or commercial beekeepers over in the Red River Valley. But then I had an opportunity to go back overseas to the island of Madagascar where I'd grown up, and we did beekeeping there for 11 years. In 2007, that we started with 2 hives each, and we had them on the back porch, upper level of his house there in Chester Bowl. You use a smoker to kind of calm down the bees, and whenever you're working the bees, you work from the sides or the back, you don't block the front. But I just want to see how much activity the queen is doing. 1 queen to each hive, and she's got her own scent. Look at that, beautiful, frame after frame, signs of a good queen. This sugar that you see on there, that's left from back when they first came to Duluth. I had to feed them just plain sugar for a while because there wasn't anything for them to get out there. On their back legs, yeah, big chunks of pollen. That's a sign that they've got all kinds of little ones in there that are needing the protein. And the hive knows, well, we need this, we need that, and the field bees then go out and find it. Bees will fly 1 to 3 to 5 miles in every direction, and this place, right on his own little plot here, he's got all kinds of fruit trees, flower gardens, all this kind of stuff, but beyond his boundaries, there's a lot of roadsides and other areas where the bees can go and get stuff. Honeybees did not originate in the United States, they originated in the European continent. And this year, this is my first year trying Russians, and they're known to be real hard workers, winter hardy and disease resistant. And the disease resistant is something that's is a big, huge factor. The queen lays a whole bunch of eggs, they hatch, they become larvae, the hive bees take care of those little bees. After they get a little older, then they become a field bee. And a field bee will go out there and bring in pollen. We'll bring in the nectar, and we'll bring in water. They need water in the hive as well. Pollen is the bee's source of protein for feeding their larvae. That's it. It's the nectar that makes the honey. You will get some miscellaneous pollen granules in the honey, and that's why people like natural raw honey, like what we sell at the farmer's market, because it has pollen in it. And why do they want local honey that still has pollen? A lot of people have allergies, seasonal allergies, and a lot of people get real relief eating local honey, and it kind of just squelches their hay fever. Never know what the bees have been into, but all we know is that they bring back a real good quality thing. But rather than guess at what kind of honey it is, we just call everything a taste of Duluth. We thought we'd dress it up a little bit, so we used the word miel, M-I-E-L, which is French for honey. Basically, bees mind their own business. All they want to do is work.
What's the lifespan of a honeybee?
In the summertime, about 6 weeks. They literally work themselves to death. So the queen is constantly replacing the bees all summer long. So seeing this much activity and seeing what we saw inside the hive, we're really hopeful for a good season. Now you could sit here and watch these things all day long. Just watching them fly, and it was just kind of calming, you know.
Now, Pam, you know, a bee population or colony is a lot like the relationship the three of us have.
How
you
so?
are our queen. Bob and I are worker bees.
You're the
You
workers.
are worker bees.
You are the workers.
You are our
yes,
queen.
we know that. We know you guys work hard. And you
all I
die
got.
when you're going to die young. No. Sorry.
Too late for that. But we got to go back to the video. I think Mark did a nice job, and what's so remarkable short sleeves.
Yeah, I know.
So he's certainly
He's
not
really
afraid.
comfortable
That
around the bees.
Isn't for everyone, but he's a great
His
contributor.
His son Zach is involved in the business, and some of the other family members as well.
It's a
And
great
we
local
thank
business.
him for sharing his time with us. Got a lot of questions coming in already. Let's start with this one. Diane from Duluth says, what type of grass seed grows well in Duluth? And then she's wondering, as a follow-up, what about Northern Blend? You familiar with that?
Well, you know, there's a lot of generic terms or marketing terms out there. Basically, stick to common Kentucky bluegrass. The whole world wants to grow that, where not zoysias and Bermudas and other things. They want to grow what we can really grow. So common Kentucky bluegrass for your sunny areas, and short and creeping red or bent fescues for your shade areas. So short fescues, common Kentucky bluegrass. Turn the package around and forget what the trade name is, and just look for those components.
All right,
And,
great.
and really, certainly if you're going to use grass seed, you want to make sure that you keep it evenly moist. Don't allow it to dry out, things like that. And if you can do a straw cover or some kind of cover, keep that seed in contact with the soil.
All right, good advice. Judy from Floodwood wants to know, I have a garden on the south side of my house. What perennials do you recommend? She says she's tried daylily and they didn't survive there.
Wow, daylilies are pretty tough. You know, and we've talked over the years, I'm going to bring it up again, Bob, and today is a perfect example of a plant that Judy can use in her garden that's beautiful and successful, but is also great for bees and butterflies, hummingbirds. Bee balm, named after the bee, of course, and it just an outstanding, can be rather aggressive, so it should do very well for her in a sunny, hot location on the south side in a garden. So bee balm would be a great choice.
Okay.
And Tom, we've got some newer varieties there that are more resistant to powdery mildew.
Yep.
And it might be worth looking for some of those as well.
All right.
Good point, Bob.
I don't know who this is from, but he has a plum tree that's 8 to 10 years old in full bloom, but not much fruit.
Not much fruit. Well, he needs to get a second tree out there, and plant Superior would be a good choice, something that fruits, and we need this cross-pollination that's occurring.
Okay. Carolyn from Duluth has daffodils that grow well and look healthy, but they don't get any blooms.
More than likely either an issue with fertilizing, so she'll want to fertilize later in the season after they're starting, well, in her case, after they're not blooming. Get them with a fertilizer, something with a good phosphorus content, and also make sure that they're in a sunny spot. If it isn't, if she isn't getting enough sun to them, they won't bloom. So.
You know, Tom, you're so right about those points. We really set the bloom in the fall. We got to get good active growth during the growing season. Also, if they're a little thick, possibly. So you have to adjust things a little bit so you get full sun, adequate moisture, the fertility that you mentioned. We need good active growth. Then we'll have enough energy to set the bulb, and then you'll flower next year.
All right. And I think we have time for one more right now. This is from Annie in Duluth, is wondering about milkweeds and why they aren't up yet.
Well, it is a very warm season plant and very, very hardy for our location, so it should be coming around just fine, but it is a warm season, so it comes very late. One of the last perennials really to come up in the spring for us. So.
Okay, and one that the pollinators like.
Yeah,
Monarchs in
monarchs
particular,
love.
absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, more questions coming up for you guys later, but each week on Great Gardening, we feature the photographs of area gardeners and their beautiful plants and landscapes. An added benefit of tonight's Grow and Show segment, a gardener and photographer with an eye for friendly visitors. This early season overview of the gardens of Ken and Nan Greshwak of Duluth gives a hint of how attractive they are to an array of bees and pollinators. Many of them captured in the stunning photographs shot by Ken. From the springtime visit of the black swallowtail on lilacs and the bumblebee's approach to the bleeding heart, to this bee making its way to the blue flag iris. A monarch butterfly and a bumblebee share a meal on this blazing star, while the bright butterfly weed makes a perfect perch for this fritillary. Ken and Nan are avid admirers of native plants and natural landscapes and belong to the local chapter of Wild Ones. Despite their cooler locale along the shores of the Big Lake, they garden with great success, as evidenced in the beauty of the blooms that bring in such a wide diversity of bird and insect life. If you have beautiful blooms with or without the birds and bees, please share them with us and our viewers and send by email to greatgardening@wdse.org or mail your pictures to 632 Niagara Court, Duluth. Again, some fabulous pictures, and we'd love to see more of those. But one clarification, Tom.
Ken, beautiful photographs,
Yeah.
just outstanding. But the swallowtail butterfly I mentioned, actually its term is a spice bush swallowtail, and really only started showing up in the Duluth area about a decade ago with the little bit warmer temperatures we've had. We've been seeing that up in our area, but beautiful photographs.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, we love to see those bees and butterflies coming in, but as mentioned, some of them are on the decline. So let's take a look at why that is. There is a threat to the bees, and a few reasons we'd like to focus on.
Yeah, it's a very complex issue. You can't point to just one thing, but I think one huge item and something that gardeners can do something about are habitat changes. When we talk about big agriculture, lots of corn and soybeans to feed the world, and bees aren't particularly fond of those things. There's also a lot of urbanization going on, parking lots, roads, and then we have kind of a loss of diversity in terms of our plant materials. And then, of course, there's pesticides that could be a component of this issue, and in the news is the neonicotinoids. These are the groups that are systemic pesticides that have been responsible for some of the problems with honeybees.
Okay. All right. Anything else we want to add to that? I know, Tom, that you've done a little research on the neonics recently.
Right. And Bob's absolutely right. And of course, we had a gardening extravaganza about a month and a half ago that Bob had organized with outstanding information about things that we can do as gardeners and as enthusiasts of a healthy ecosystem that we can do for plantings and things like that in our environment.
We're going to talk a little bit more later on about what we can do and what all our gardeners out there can do to really make a difference. Let's go to a few more questions, though, while we have a chance. Nancy from Superior has a maple tree. It's 20 years old, looks to be dying, sparse foliage and brittle branches. Anything she can do?
Wow. Yeah, that sounds, and we're actually seeing a lot of sort of questionable maples that are not coming through the winter very well, and she should keep an eye on it. Depending on the variety, it may not have made it. I'm seeing sort of those adolescent maple trees or teenage maple trees that are not making it through the course of the past winter that we've had. So
we're right at that margin of acceptable range for the maple, and I think if you do have to replace, there isn't probably too much you can do, but if you have to replace, go to a local nursery, get our good basic sugar maples and our red maples, nothing too exotic, and get a good site for them.
Right.
Okay, Debbie from Bayfield says she bought some bulbs. They had sprouts on them, and she's wondering, can I plant them with the sprouts?
Depending on what bulbs she bought, but absolutely she'll want to get them planted as soon as she can. So.
All right. Donna from Lake Nebagaman says, how do I get rid of cutworms and how do I prevent them?
Boy, cutworms. We have so many different varieties. I think the tomato plant is one that's really vulnerable to cutworm. There you want to actually wrap the stalk as you're planting it, and some kind of a protective collar that's just a little bit above the soil line, a little bit below, or you can use cans and other things around there. And that's going to be one option that she's got. The other option, there are some insecticides that could be used. There's a biological BT could be used, but it needs to be applied very early on the plant's development when the cutworm larvae are still very small.
Okay. Before we move on, we want to point out these gorgeous geraniums that we got from our underwriter, Swanson Greenhouses. Look how beautiful these are, and there's so many different varieties now.
Right. Yeah, you know, and my favorite have been for years the Martha Washingtons. And we see the fancy violet here, which is just outstanding. And you look at all the different colors. I actually wore my shirt to sort of blend in.
To complement the geraniums. There are some new hybrids with the, Gail told me, with the ivy geranium and the zonal geranium combined, and they're really hardy and full and shrub-like. Yeah,
and those really are the cascading kind that work great in hanging baskets, so you get lots of color and even different scented geraniums, like we have the one that's scented here with citronella.
Citronella, yes. So they have lemon and rose scented as well. They get small flowers. Thank you so much again to Swanson Greenhouses for the geraniums and the great selection.
We're chuckling because we love the citronella. We wonder if it'll keep away our favorite pollinator, all those mosquitoes.
Okay, here's hoping. Well, now on to this week's video garden tour, which takes us to Superior. After the tour, we will take a short break, during which you can find out how to get some wonderful local garden resources. But we'll be back with much more on bees, hives, honey, and flowers after this.
Hi, my name is Maggie Flowers, and I want to welcome you to my northern Wisconsin garden, which is located in Superior, directly across from the beautiful Maggie Golf Course on North 58th Street. And I started these walking gardens about 15 years ago and have been adding to them ever since. And I enjoy particular iris in the spring, and everybody's favorite, the peonies, are just fabulous flower, and I have a lot of those. And my William Baffin rose bush that is in full bloom right now. I'm probably more of a designer when it comes to gardens than am I a knowledgeable plant person. This is a natural walking garden, and I want it to look as natural as possible, but I still work at making it look natural. I don't want it to look forced. And I'm particularly concerned about the line of the garden and how the line draws you into the garden, and I like to keep the garden extremely well manicured. This is a Japanese tree lilac, and I have 4 of them on the property, and I love they're extremely fragrant and beautiful lacy blooms that just drift whenever a breeze comes along. This elderberry, black lace elderberry in front, kind of gives way to that darker, mysterious value that I have elsewhere in the garden. And then right beyond that, you see the brightness of the yarrow and its many different varied shades. Kind of like, almost like there's a spotlight shining on the yarrow. That's called weeping snow shower, and in the spring it gets pink blooms which just fall gently from the crown. And the loose strife against the Maltese cross. And then the tiger lilies will bloom quite soon, and they're, you know, a really bright orange. And then I have some red ones in there too. So once again, this is the orange, yellow, and red summer garden. And then this is a Veronica, and look how tall and beautiful that is. So this will be various shades of pink, and then this is these are yellow daylilies through here, and this just gets a riot of color. The sounds of the stream and the birds, and you know, the beauty of the color and the fragrance, and it's a place to relax. It's also a place of very hard work, but it's rewarding work. It's enjoyable work, and the benefits that you get from it in sharing it with other people that recognize it is most satisfying.
Welcome back to Great Gardening, your best regional source for garden advice and information, with our experts, Tom Casper and Bob Olin. And this week, we're talking about the animals that we rely on for the pollination of our plants and the survival of the plants, and ultimately our survival, I guess. Those are bees, insects, the other pollinators that are at risk that we talked about before, because there are some risk factors out now that in recent years people have been becoming aware of.
Really true, and people should be aware. They may be thinking, what's the big deal of pollination? Without pollination, you really don't get seed formation. Without seed formation, you get fruit formation. So that's why it's so important for so many of these flowering plants that we've got. And there are some real definite stressors out there.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the fact that there's urbanization and so forth that's caused some of these problems. And the great thing is there's so many things that the gardener can do.
Yeah, let's take a look at what the everyday gardener can do to help solve the problem, because there really are, as you mentioned, Bob, a number of things that you can give a try.
That's right. Number one is plant more flowers.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's not just exaggerating.
Yes.
I think if we got greater diversity and if we got people that plant larger blocks of flowers, we want to try to get at least 3 or 4 different species, but we want a nice block. If you could plant a 5x5 piece or area, 25 square feet or yard, just dedicate it to one particular species, flowering species, and then a couple other things that we really want to do is we want to try to extend the season. Obviously, all the pollinators, including our honeybees, really need something to eat early in the season through late fall. So really you want to plant a diverse group of plants. The great thing about this is while you're planting flowers, you're actually enhancing the pollinator population, which will in fact give you better fruit and better vegetables in your garden.
Use native plants as well?
Natives are excellent because they coexist along with our native pollinators. We want to be extremely careful about the chemical insecticides that we're using. And in many cases, this concept of practicing integrated pest management, that just means you're going to take a look at any potential damage, say from an insect or other pest, and ask yourself the question, do I really have to control? Am I at the point where it's doing so much damage that may be really impacting the yield and productivity? And then we have a little bit of a triage that we go through where you want to use the least toxic material possible. You want to be extremely careful about application. But for most gardeners, just the elimination of toxic pesticides is probably the best choice.
And also, along the lines of the integrated pest management, make sure you know what you're dealing with or what the issue is. And we've had many calls over the years where folks have called with a question or something that's bugging them, and it really has turned out to not be what they thought. So make sure you know what is impacting that plant that you're concerned about before you go out and create a course of action.
Yeah, keep yourself informed, and that's what we're here to help do as well, and let people know you really can make a difference. Let's get back to some of the questions that people have been calling in. We have quite a pile here. One about a prairie fire tree that last year had tiny leaves, lots of flowers, now 85% bare. Will it recover?
You know, we've mentioned prairie fire. It's actually one of our favorite zone 4 flowering crabs, and we got to emphasize that. It does have a fair amount of scab resistance. It's very attractive. However, in a cold winter like we had, if this person was up over the hill, zone 3, this sounds an awful lot like winter damage to me, and prairie fire is really not rated for the colder parts of our region.
What about this one now? Kurt from Two Harbors, who says he has a Harold apple tree with little foliage. Could that be winter kill?
Well, Harold is pretty hardy, but same thing, zone 4, up over the hill. And there's a lot of other factors that we really, again, the integrated sort of concept. What kind of condition was the tree in when it went into the winter? What kind of exposure? The different kinds of things that might have impacted its ability to go through the winter. So it's not just oftentimes just simply how cold it was.
Right.
There's a lot of other factors. So.
Okay, Gary from Floodwood wants to know, can I prune a potentilla?
Sure.
All right.
Set her right to the ground.
He wants to do that very soon, though, so there's a chance to regrow. We'd rather see that done in maybe May, but early May at least. But nonetheless, you could still probably do it and get away with it right now.
Okay, and also from Gary, what's the best way to dry onions, the yellow ones?
Well, I think the big thing is to let them mature. So they really need to be planted early, and then they need to be mature. And then we really want a storage onion. When people have problems with onions, many times they have a green eating onion rather than a variety that's been selected and bred for its keeping quality. So select a good storage onion to begin with, and then let them mature, make sure the tops are broken off, and then you can lift them and hang in a well-dried and airy location.
My mom used to put them in old pantyhose and hang them up.
Not been my practice.
Thanks, Mom.
Audrey from Duluth has a Japanese lilac. It doesn't have any flower buds yet. Should she be concerned about that?
No, they're probably, you know, and again, the part of the winter we've gone through and the lateness of the spring, they generally are not setting buds, flower buds yet, or they are, but you can't see them yet, so not to panic. Although some Japanese lilacs will go alternate years. So just depending on how heavily it flowered last year. So not to panic yet, but.
Okay. Time for one more question. This one's about lilac. Phil from Hibbing says his lilacs bloomed and were healthy last year, but now they're producing few flowers and the leaves are cupped. They're 7 years old. Not the leaves, the lilacs.
Those are old leaves.
Yeah. You know, you'd like to take a little closer look. Sometimes cupped leaves can certainly be a nutrient deficiency. It can be winter hardiness as well. Although if it's a common lilac, we wouldn't expect that. But he's up there in the Hibbing range where things can be a little bit cooler. Can also be insect problems when they begin to cup on themselves. So I think that what he can do right now, he can probably a little bit of fertility at this point just before rain. And then you just have to see how that bush survives. In many cases, very hardy. They could be cut down to the ground level and they will resprout. So he's not done yet with that lilac for sure.
All right, great. We'll have more questions and answers later. But another thing that's being done to protect and propagate bees is hobby beekeeping. It seems more and more people are putting up hives, and we found a great example of that nearby.
I never would have imagined that I would have become involved with beekeeping. Well, I have Eric to thank for that. He proposed that it would be an excellent idea to have bee hives in my backyard. Both of our neighbors were very much for it. They had grown up in families where their parents were beekeepers, and we started with one hive 5 years ago, and we started just in this garden. Things went well the first year, and we've expanded quite a bit actually since. Yeah, I think the general estimate is what 2 out of every 3 or 3 out of every 5 bites of food is dependent upon bees for pollination.
The bees that we get come from California each year after they've pollinated all the almond orchards. So they pollinate those in February, and then the beekeepers will package them up and then they'll disperse them across the country for other beekeepers to start propagating the colonies.
And it's amazing how well tuned and efficient and organized a colony of bees is.
I think one thing to note right now when you're looking at the top of the box, you can see, you know, it's maybe 20,000 bees in there, but they're all really calm. They're not angry, they're just quietly working, and there's food for them, you know, out in the area now, dandelions and crabapple trees.
These boxes here are called deeps, and those deeps are filled with frames, and there's usually 8 to 10 frames in each of those boxes. And those are the frames, those frames are the sort of architecture by which the bees create their hive. So we'll pull some out and let you take a look at them.
So we're gonna do a rotation, it's called, and it's a springtime maintenance of the hive, and the goal is by the end of the summer that they fill enough honey in both deeps to sustain themselves for the winter, and that should be roughly between 80 and 100 pounds of honey. And then anything above that, we try to put a smaller box on top, and that's called a super or a shallow box. And so that's what we would harvest. We leave them 80 to 100 pounds and we take what is left.
There's just no way that they'll make it through a long winter like Duluth has without an ample food supply. We've really tried to winter over and to continue the various strains of hives that we've had, and we've had mixed results with that. This winter, even though it was a really harsh and really long and really cold winter, we had 2 of our 3 hives that entered the winter survive, which was outstanding. That's one of the sort of motivating reasons for me that I like to do this, is that I feel like if I can keep hives going, then there is some development probably of a strain and the genetics within that hive that are probably favorable.
Pollen is the feed for the young larvae, and then honey and nectar is the food source for all the adult bees or the worker bees. So that's why they collect their pollen. There's the queen right there. Right there.
She's right in the center. She's very long and very golden, sort of brown in color, and a very big black spot on the back of her head. After I started raising bees, I have made my peace with dandelions because they serve as a definite pollen source early in the season for bees.
First they go out into the world and they harvest the nectar, they consume it, they stick their tongue into a flower and drink up the nectar, goes into their stomach, they digest it with an enzyme, they come back to the hive and they basically vomit it into a cell. I know it's very nice, but that's what they do. And then they keep depositing it, and then what they do is dehydrate it, so they reduce the amount of water in it, and when it is fully reduced and it's to a state that can't ferment or spoil, then they put a wax cap on the top of it like this, so then you can see it's done and they know it's done, and they'll work this whole frame, and in a week or two it'll all be capped fresh. It will never ferment. Seemingly complicated, but it is really a simple thing to do, and I think the benefits are well worth it. It'll make you look at flowers differently because you'll see some of your little friends on there, and it just kind of makes you take pause a little bit and appreciate some of the wonders of life.
Really was very cool to go out there and take a look at that. I admire people who are beekeepers, and just right around the corner, right in town, they're doing it.
I'm so thankful for people that do that because I could never do that.
Oh, really?
But love honey.
Yeah.
And actually, I love the comments about you'll take a look at your yard differently, you'll take a look at your flowers differently, and
exactly.
I think appreciating simple pleasures is what this is all about, really.
And while this started as a hobby, Dave and Eric do sell their honey now under the label Lake Superior Apiary. In fact, they do provide the honey for the local Duluth Coffee Company. And so there's a look at it. They gave us a taste. It was really delicious stuff.
Now, people really do appreciate local honey, and we've got some nice producers in the area, so that's really good.
Also, Eric's mother, Liz, is involved in the business, and she took this picture. It's beautiful. It's a picture of a honeybee gathering pollen from one of her peonies. That's a Guardian of the Monastery peony, and that picture will be featured on the June cover of Bee Culture magazine.
Beautiful.
All right, on to some more questions here. Bonnie wants to know, can you mulch right up to older tree trunks?
Well, you really should leave some space because the mulch, of course, isn't organic. It's wood product, and it can cause rotting around the trunk or the base of that tree. So keeping a little bit of space, and it doesn't have to be a lot, ½ inch to an inch, keep that bark, the mulch away from the trunk of the tree to protect it from rotting. So.
All right, we have to move through these pretty fast. We're running out of time. Can the gardener do hand pollination?
You know, you actually can, and people have used on their tomatoes things like electric toothbrushes, but if you really want to be involved, get a feather duster, and actually some parts of the world where they've decimated their honeybee populations, they are in fact hand pollinating with feather dusters.
All right, that's from Dan in Tower, and Lynn from Embarrass wants an easy to grow ground cover to replace grass.
Creeping Charlie.
There we
go.
The bees love it, right?
The bees love it. I'm sorry.
Our next question, how to get rid of Creeping Charlie?
Take it to Embarrass. But, you know, there's a lot of ground covers that will work. Crown vetch is one that comes to mind. The different vincas also work very well for that. Creeping phlox, stuff like that. But she's always probably going to deal with some grass issues.
Okay,
so.
One more quick one. Josie from Duluth has a choke cherry tree with little black bugs. Is there a non-chemical way to control that bug?
That would be a real challenge. First, is it doing any damage? You know, that's the big thing. And then
maybe you don't need to control it?
You don't need to, and then there are some biologicals would be a next step. So first, maybe we don't need to control it, and then there are some biologicals that could be used.
Okay, great. Well, we take you back now to the gardens of Maggie Flowers, a longtime interior designer with skills in the outdoors as well.
Standing here is one of my most favorite parts of the garden because you get to see the water, the reflection in the water, and the different shapes of the stones, and the incredible contrast in foliage. And I like the spininess of the flag iris. I have a lot of flag iris. I like the architectural form of flag iris. And then that softness of the mop heads, just relaxed in their place. I feed the garden in the spring with 10-10-10, but then otherwise I have a lot of mulch in my soil. These will be all that buttery yellow with pink in it that picks up on the pink coneflower. What I'd like to do in the garden too is to create elevation so that everything is not flat. And this is a great little area here where I have the purple and the botanica, which gives rise to the purple and the blue in the monkshood that's behind. Underneath, all of these paths are hand-dug trenches with drain tile, so that the garden never is sacrificed to any overly wet conditions. But look at the beautiful salmon and pink in that. That is called St. Elmo's grass. I have been doing a vegetable garden here for about 20 years as well. So it's fun to sit in the garden house and you look at the vista that looks over the food garden, vegetable garden, and then when you look to the right you see the flower garden. And it's a Norwegian design, and it's actually called a storbowl, which is in Norwegian terms is a place that they use to store their vegetables. It's a very comforting place to sit and read or visit. The iron planters are planted up with castor bean plant, and I like the structure of it. It's very tall, very colorful, kind of exotic, and it plays against the gray neutral tone of the garden house. And then the brightly colored hosta that's in there, and also kale. It's just an extension. It's designing outside instead of designing inside, and the same rules apply of composition, form, light and shadow, scale, variation, and all of the elements that exist in interior design exist in garden design as well as in two-dimensional art.
Thanks again to Maggie for that tour. Unfortunately, that's about all the time we have for this special edition of Great Gardening, but we do hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did and that maybe you learned something. Go to our website for more information and updates. It is wdse.org/gardening.
And on there's mention of another plant sale coming up.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, St. Louis County Master Gardeners out at St. Lawrence Church in Piedmont from 8 till noon on Saturday.
Okay, great. Well, a huge thank you to our garden experts, Bob Olin and Tom Casper. Also, thank you to our phone volunteers from the Carleton County Master Gardeners and all who called in their questions. But please stay tuned to find out how you can show your support for this program. We really appreciate it. From all of us here, thanks for watching and enjoy the garden.